Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonov and you are watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky unveils 20-point peace plan to end Ukraine war. Nasri Asfoura has been declared the winner of Honduras presidential election by the country's electoral authority. And at least 5 killed in a mosque blast in Nigeria during evening prayers. A new 20-point peace plan aimed at ending the war in Ukraine has been unveiled by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The plan proposes the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the east alongside security guarantees from the United States and NATO.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Tuesday unveiled a draft 20-point peace plan aimed at ending the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Zelensky said the document largely reflects shared positions between Ukraine and the United States, while acknowledging that several key issues remain unresolved. The plan offers Russia a potential withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the east, with a demilitarized zone to be established in their place. It follows meetings between US and Ukrainian envoys in Florida over the weekend. It also proposes maintaining Ukraine's armed forces at 800,000 personnel in peacetime, alongside security guarantees from the United States, NATO and European partners for a coordinated military response should Russia invade Ukraine again. Other elements include Ukraine's accession to the European Union within a clear time frame, the creation of multiple economic recovery funds totaling $800 billion and the country's continued non-nuclear status. The draft peace plan would be submitted to Parliament for approval or put to a nationwide referendum. On Wednesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russian President Vladimir Putin had been briefed on contacts with envoys of US President Donald Trump regarding American proposals for a possible Ukrainian peace deal. Russia has not commented on the new draft plan, but said it will continue negotiations through existing channels, adding that the main parameters of Moscow's stance are already well known to peace negotiators.
Meanwhile, Moscow says Russia and the United States have resumed negotiations on reviving diplomatic missions, but Russian Foreign Ministry says the negotiation process is sluggish. Dasha Chernyshova has more on that in Moscow.
Moscow says Russia and the United States are continuing talks on the normalization of work of their diplomatic missions, though progress remains slow. According to Alexander Guzarov, the director of Russian Foreign Ministry's North Atlantic Department, several rounds of expert-level consultations have been held, the latest just days ago at a working level. He said the sides made visa issuance for certain categories of diplomatic staff more predictable and have moved towards easing restrictions on diplomats' travel within host countries. However, Gusarov stressed that meaningful stabilization of bilateral relations would require far greater ambition from both sides. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin was briefed about recent talks between Russian and US representatives in Miami. Special Presidential Envoy Kirill Dmitriev delivered the report outlining discussions held with American officials. Peskov said Washington is well aware of Moscow's key positions, and the Kremlin will now assess the next steps and continue contacts through existing channels. He declined to comment on any documents involved, emphasizing that sensitive diplomacy should not be conducted through the media. Dasha Chernyshova for A News in Moscow.
French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with NATO chief Mark Rutte on Christmas Eve to discuss Ukraine and Europe's next steps. The leaders focused on coordinating military aid, long-term security planning, and the possibility of engaging directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin to advance peace efforts. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where French President Emmanuel Macron talked to NATO chief Mark Rutte on Christmas Eve about Ukraine and Europe's next steps. In a post on the social media platform X, Macron said their meeting focused on the war in Ukraine and coordination amongst allies. He stated that efforts to provide Ukraine with, quote, strong security guarantees will continue from January in Paris under the so-called Coalition of the Willing. That partnership was sparked by a February meeting in Paris led by France and the UK to create a European security response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It includes 35 EU and NATO members committed to sustaining military aid, training, and long-term security planning for Ukraine. Macron has also commented about staying open to direct engagement with Russian President Vladimir Putin if it helps advance peace efforts. He recently called for restarting contact with the Kremlin following a European Council meeting marked by the decision to grant 90 billion euros in aid to Kyiv without touching frozen Russian assets. The Elysée said, quote, "It's once again useful to speak with Putin as the prospect of a ceasefire and peace negotiations becomes clearer." This after Putin expressed readiness to, quote, "engage in dialogue with his French counterpart." According to Macron, the aim is to avoid being solely dependent on U.S. President Trump's envoys in negotiations for Kyiv, as they have been quick to echo the Russian leader's demands. Wednesday's exchange between Rutte and Macron underlines continued alignment between France and NATO and also highlights Europe's push to play a more central role in shaping Ukraine's future security. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Algeria's parliament has passed a law declaring France's colonization a crime, demanding an apology and reparations. The move comes amid strained diplomatic ties between the two countries, worsened by France's stance on Western Sahara. Algeria says France bears legal responsibility for the tragedies of its 1830-1962 rule, including mass killings and deportations. Lawmakers are also calling for the return of looted artifacts. France hasn't yet responded. The U.S. Justice Department says more than 1 million newly uncovered documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein are being reviewed for release. Officials add that lawyers are working around the clock to make legally required redactions to protect victims, but the process could take several more weeks. Thousands of records have already been released, with many more still under review. The delays have drawn criticism from victims and lawmakers, demanding greater transparency about Epstein and possible co-conspirators. Authorities are urging residents to stay off roads and follow evacuation orders as the severe weather continues to batter parts of California. Emergency crews remain on high alert amid ongoing flood, wind, and mudslide threats during the busy holiday travel period.
A powerful winter storm swept across California on Wednesday, bringing heavy rain, strong winds and mountain snow, and prompting evacuation warnings in parts of Southern California due to flash flooding and mudslide risks. Forecasters warned this could be the wettest Christmas in years, especially for areas recently scarred by wildfires. Authorities issued evacuation orders and warnings for vulnerable communities in Los Angeles, San Bernardino and Orange counties as mud and debris flows threatened hillside neighborhoods. Several roads were closed and emergency crews carried out rescues amid flooding. The storm, driven by a series of atmospheric rivers, caused hazardous travel conditions during the busy holiday period. Flood and wind advisories were in effect across coastal areas, while near whiteout conditions hit mountain roads. Over the weekend, at least one person was killed in a weather-related crash in Northern California, officials said. California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency in several counties, mobilizing emergency crews as forecasters warned that life-threatening conditions could persist through Christmas Day.
Nasri Asfoura has been declared the winner of Honduras' presidential election by the country's electoral authority. The announcement follows weeks of delays and ongoing claims of irregularities.
The Honduran National Electoral Council has declared Nasri Asfoura the country's president-elect following a razor-thin election after weeks of delays caused by technical problems and allegations of fraud. The Conservative National Party candidate secured 40.3% of the vote, narrowly defeating Salvador Nasrallah of the centre-right Liberal Party, who received 39.5%. Following the announcement, the National Party emphasised unity among its members and called for reconciliation across the country.
It's not over until it's over. Today we have gratitude, but above all with humility. The differences we may have as a party are normal in a democracy, but today we call on all brothers who participated in this competition to unite, to build in unity, but above all, in love for Honduras, so that we can build the Honduras that we all deserve.
Meanwhile, Nasrallah rejected the outcome of what he described as a flawed process, but urged his supporters to avoid confrontation.
I will not accept a result built on omissions. That is not my way of life. Accepting that would be betraying the trust of those who voted. And I did not come to politics in 2011 to look the other way and play pretend when things are going wrong. I'm not calling for confrontation. I'm not asking you to take to the streets, because that does not have any positive result.
Nasrallah and other opponents of Asfura have maintained that a last-minute endorsement by US President Donald Trump amounted to electoral interference and ultimately influenced the outcome of the vote. The election results were extremely close, and due to the turbulent nature of the vote processing system, around 15% of tally sheets had to be counted by hand to determine the winner.
A deadly blast hit a mosque in Nigeria during evening prayers on Wednesday, killing 5 and injuring more than 30, authorities said. The city has been a focal point of a nearly 20-year insurgency by Boko Haram and its offshoot Islamic State West Africa province, which has caused widespread death and displacement in the region. While no group has claimed responsibility, militants have previously targeted mosques and crowded areas with suicide attacks and explosives. Despite military efforts, attacks on civilians continue to pose a serious threat in northeastern Nigeria. 13 European countries and Japan have condemned Israel's approval of 19 new West Bank settlements, calling it a violation of international law and a threat to regional stability. The new plan brings the total under the current government to 210, a nearly 50% increase since 2022. The countries urged Israel to reverse the move, warning it could undermine peace efforts and the two-state solution. However, Israel defended the decision, saying its people have the right to live in their territory. In 2025, decades of shadow conflict between Iran and Israel erupted into open warfare with airstrikes, missile attacks, and massive civilian displacement. A U.S.-brokered ceasefire ended a 12-day clash, but regional tensions and uncertainty over the conflict's outcome linger.
For decades, Iran and Israel fought a shadow war through proxies, covert strikes, and threats. In June 2025, that shadow disappeared. In the early hours of June 13th, Israel launched a surprise wave of airstrikes deep inside Iran. More than 200 fighter jets hit nuclear facilities, military bases, and command centers from Natanz and Fordow to Isfahan. Iran says scientists, senior commanders, and civilians were killed. Israel called it preemptive self-defense, arguing Iran was nearing nuclear weapons, a claim Tehran denies. Iran hit back with hundreds of ballistic missiles targeting Israeli cities. For nearly 2 weeks, the two countries traded fire openly and directly for the first time. Air defenses lit up the skies. Sirens wailed, casualties mounted on both sides. Hospitals were damaged, ambulances destroyed, and as bombardment intensified, nearly 9 million people fled Iran's major cities. The conflict escalated again on June 21st when the United States entered the fight, striking Iran's nuclear sites with bunker buster bombs. Iran responded by firing missiles at a major US airbase in Qatar, pushing the region to the brink. A fragile US-brokered ceasefire followed days later. All parties, the US, Israel and Iran, claimed victory in the 12-day war, which ended on June 25th. Yet experts say these claims require qualification. The conflict's strategic outcome remains inconclusive, offering neither lasting peace nor an end to hostilities in the region.
Now let's take a look at the key stories shaping the region. And now to the main events that define the year for us. On 8th of August 2025, US President Donald Trump met with the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia at the White House. They agreed on new measures for peace, including transport corridors and changes in Armenia's constitution. Both leaders said the summit was an important step for stability and cooperation in the region.
On August 8, 2025, US President Donald Trump hosted meetings at the White House with the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia. These talks, held both one-on-one and together, ended with a joint statement at the Trump Route to International Peace and Prosperity Summit. The result was seen as a clear sign of international support for peace in the South Caucasus. The key agreements include the creation of a strategic working group between the US and Azerbaijan and the extension of the waiver for Section 907. The foreign ministers of Azerbaijan and Armenia have signed a joint appeal to close the OSCE Minsk process and its related structures. Armenia, together with the US and agreed third parties, will set up a framework for the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity project within its territory. Azerbaijan is upgrading the railway in Nakhchivan and will extend it to the Armenian border. The project includes both rail and road, expected to be fully finished by 2030.
President Trump brings peace to Caucasus, and we're grateful for that. And I'm sure that Armenia and Azerbaijan will find courage and responsibility to reconcile, and also the people will reconcile. We will turn the page of standoff, confrontation and bloodshed, and provide bright and safe future for our children.
The agreements signed at the White House are regarded as a significant turning point in regional relations.
This is a success for our countries and for our region, and a success for the world, because a more peaceful region means a safer world. This is peace through strength in a neutral. Mr. President, today's great achievement is yet another testimony to your global leadership and your legacy as a statesman and a peacemaker on the world stage. Bringing peace required vision, political courage, and determination.
The leaders expressed hope that this new phase will replace decades of conflict with lasting cooperation, stability, and prosperity.
It's been a year since an Azerbaijan Airlines plane crashed near Aktau, Kazakhstan, killing 38 people. Relatives have returned to the site to commemorate the victims, as authorities near the final stage of the investigation. Preliminary findings suggest the aircraft was affected by external interference over Russian airspace, with a final report expected soon. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports from Aktau, Kazakhstan.
We are at the site of the plane crash near Aktau, around 30 kilometers from the city. 1 year has passed since this area became the scene of a major aviation disaster. On the 25th of December last year, a passenger aircraft operated by Azerbaijan Airlines was flying from Baku to Grozny when it crashed while attempting an emergency landing near Aktau airport. There were 67 people on board, 38 were killed and 29 survived. In the hours and days after the crash, emergency services, medical teams and investigators worked here continuously. We were also on the ground at the time, reporting from this location day and night as the search and rescue operation was underway and as official information began to come in. A year later, relatives of those who died have returned to the site to commemorate the victims and lay flowers. According to the Kazakh authorities, the investigation into the crash is now nearing its final stage. Deputy Prime Minister Kanat Bozumbayev has said that the Ministry of Transport has completed the technical part of the inquiry. The remaining step is to receive reports from the developers and operators of the aircraft's aeronautical systems. Once those reports are submitted, Kazakhstan expects to conclude its part of the investigation by the end of this year or in early January. The final report is expected to be published online. And according to preliminary findings cited by officials, the aircraft crashed as a result of physical and technical external interference that occurred in Russian airspace over Grozny. Fariza Kalimurzina, Aktau, A-News.
Georgia's parliamentary speaker has accused the European Union of using visas as a political tool rather than a practical travel issue. His remarks come as Brussels warns that visa-free travel remains conditional and could be suspended if standards are not met. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi.
Speaking to journalists, Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Papashvili said that the European Union frames visas as a form of punishment and visa-free travel as a political incentive. An approach, he argued, reflects Brussels' bureaucratic mindset rather than the needs of Georgian citizens. He noted that Georgians have long obtained visas to countries such as the United Kingdom, Ireland, and the United States, and said that portraying visas as something to be feared is misleading. Papashvili also downplayed the potential impact of restrictions, pointing out that visas for holders of diplomatic passports have existed for years without disrupting travel. He described repeated warnings from Brussels as political pressure rather than a substantive policy discussion. The European Commission, however, maintains that visa-free travel is conditional. In its 8th report under the visa suspension mechanism, the Commission warned that the regime could be suspended if required standards are not met, citing concerns related to the rule of law, democratic governance, judicial independence, and anti-corruption efforts. At the same time, Papashvili accused the European Commission of double standards, pointing to its latest visa monitoring report. He claimed that sections on corruption and human rights were removed for Ukraine and Moldova, despite serious problems in both countries, calling the move the evidence of political selectivity. The remarks highlights a clear shift in the Georgian Dreams narrative. Until recently, party leaders rejected the idea that visa-free travel could be suspended at all. Now, while still dismissing the legitimacy of EU pressure, the government is increasingly acknowledging that the issue is real and politically sensitive. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said that Turkey continues to defend the rights of Palestinians at a meeting with Hamas officials in Ankara, according to Foreign Ministry sources quoted by local media. Hamas delegation said the group had met its obligations under the ceasefire deal and that Israel is obstructing progress to the second phase of the truce with continued strikes in Gaza. They added that the amount of aid being let into the Strip isn't sufficient to address the needs of the population. Iran has said it plans to build nuclear power plants to meet the electricity needs of its population and industries as the UN Security Council convened on Tuesday to discuss the reinstatement of Tehran's nuclear sanctions. Our Turaj Shiralilo has more.
The spokesman of Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Behruz Kamalvandi, said that Tehran is considering building its own nuclear power plants, while the UN Security Council discussed return of sanctions on Iran's civilian nuclear program. According to the spokesman, Iran is currently focused on cooperation with Russia to build its nuclear reactors in addition to the Bushehr power plant. It is Iran's first ever 1,000 megawatt nuclear power plant and has been connected to the national grid since 2012 based on an agreement with Rosatom. The spokesman added that Iran can have its domestically built power plants and is working hard in this regard with the objective to become a power plant builder and continue cooperation with other countries. According to Kamalvandi, Iran is taking part in building a 300 megawatt power plant in Dar Khovein in Khuzestan province because its industrial capacity allows it to manufacture steam generators, boilers, and turbines. Last October, Iran and Russia signed documents in Moscow on nuclear energy production and launching the construction of nuclear power reactors. They agreed on developing small modular reactors, SMRs, which can generate 300 megawatts of nuclear power. They also approved the construction of 4 units of 1,250 megawatt reactors at a value of more than $25 billion. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council held a meeting on Resolution 2231 regarding return of Iran's nuclear sanctions. The Security Council's stance on Iran's nuclear activities remained divided on the issue, split between those who support the reinstatement of sanctions and the members who believe the sanctions should be permanently lifted. Turad Shiralilu, Tehran, A News.
You are up to date with the world news for hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.